We are live streaming this show on our Big Exit LinkedIn page and our Big Exit YouTube channel. So, if all goes well, then we should be live LinkedIn as well as on YouTube. And oh, there is Graham as well. Hello, Graham. Good afternoon or afternoon for both of us, but maybe whoever is watching this live, you might be watching this in the early mornings in the US as well. So I want to welcome you all to the Master Your Exit live show. It's powered by the Big Exit. I'm Lynn, and together with Graham, we are your host for today. On this Master Your Exit show, we're going to bring you practical insights, expert interviews, tools, all these things to help small business owners like yourself to prepare for your big exit. And in case you don't know, this show airs live every Tuesday. And if you're in the US, that's at 7 a.m. Los Angeles time or 10 a.m. in New York. Or if you're over the water on the European side, then it's 3 p.m. in London or 4 p.m. in Brussels time. We keep each show very short and very simple, maximum 30 minutes. Today will be the same thing. And if you're tuning in on our YouTube channel or our LinkedIn channel, welcome. If you're joining us live here in the virtual studio, also welcome. You can drop all of your exit questions in our studio chat, and we will answer them live here on the show today. And if you're catching this episode later, you can find more episodes, all of the episodes of the show on our website, thebigexit.co/master your exit shows, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. Now, on today's show, we are having open office hours, which means that we are going to be answering your questions. We'll do that once a month, every 4 weeks, and you can always send in your questions via the website. We've got some great exit questions that you've sent to us, and today we are going to be deep diving into one of those questions. And it's a question that Graham and I, get asked basically all the time. The question is, what's the most common issue that we get to see, Graham and I get to see, when an owner wants to sell their business? So that's what we're going to be diving into a little bit more today. Graham and I will be sharing the things that we see as most common issues when a business owner is thinking about selling, wants to sell, is thinking about preparing of selling, is in the early stages of that exiting process. So, Graham, you're here as well on the show. Do you see your face as big as you see my face, or am I having a really
I think I'm a little scroll bar at the top of on the top of Zoom, but I think that's just some sort of setting. But probably better just to leave it as is. You can
I'm
hear
not
my
going to touch
voice.
anything before the tech gremlins start doing weird stuff. So, anyway, great to
Exactly.
have you on the show, Graham. And yeah, so let's dive a little bit deeper into this question of like your early stage business owner thinking about selling your business, preparing it for a sale. Like, what's the most common issue that you get to see when a business owner takes this first step?
And I think, I mean, there's a few issues, but let me start with the as you say, the most common one. And I think that's actually unrealistic expectations around the value of the business. I'm going to dive into that a little bit because I think there's a couple of threads to this. But the first one is often what business owners do is they have a number in their head, and that number in their head is the number that they wish to achieve. So they kind of do the maths and say, I want to retire from my business, or I want to take a 5-year sabbatical, or whatever, it depends on stage of their life. And they work back to what that number is. That might be $5 million, it might be $1 million. And that almost often with owners, we found that gets entrenched, and that is kind of, well, their business has to be worth that because that's the number they need. Okay, so that's the first thing when it comes to valuation expectation. The second thing is often, they've heard something from a friend of a friend, whether it's at the yoga studio or the golf course, whatever the case might be. my friend sold their business for X. My business is similar to theirs, therefore my business is worth, X or X plus. And that's also very dangerous, because without kind of diving beneath the skin of the business, it's not always easy to kind of apply just those common multiples. Um, and sometimes when you do, the owner's pleasantly surprised, but more often than not, there's reasons that those businesses sold for those astronomical valuations. And your business might not have those same unique reasons in place. The third one, in terms of unrealistic value expectations, often comes from, let's call it, whether it's advisors or brokers, and I'm not knocking the industry, but often there's a vested interest in terms of giving a valuation. So if you somebody who sells businesses for a living, part of what you're trying to do is get as many mandates as possible. And we do see a lot of this, unfortunately. You've got the good actors, but you also have bad actors who will tell a business owner what they think they want to hear so that they can land the mandate. So when it comes to valuations, you always have to ask yourself, are you getting that valuation from a credible and independent and reliable source, somebody who's actually got experience in that space? So coming into this sort of situation, business owners are often kind of got these unrealistic expectations, and then you kind of have to paint the facts to them. And when you do that, often it's a shock. Often it is a question of, well, I thought it was worth 5, but you're telling me that it's maybe worth 1, and actually maybe not even sellable. The reality from a statistics point of view is that between 80 and 85% of small businesses, when I say small businesses, I'm talking businesses with, turnover of less than $10 million a year. Okay. Don't sell or are unable to sell. Of the sort of 20% that do sell, only around about 30 to 35% of them actually get the price that they want. So there's this big gap, both in terms of expectation and reality when it comes to, is the business, what's it worth? And is it even sellable? So a very long answer, I guess, to a short question, but I just wanted to kind of break it down in terms of, I guess, what that value gap is and why it exists. We can maybe talk just now about kind of, so what is it worth and why is it worth that and how do you get to that number? But I think that's possibly a separate discussion. I think today it's around, there's a gap. We need to recognize that gap. And once the owner is kind of grounded in where they are, then you can start to plan, for an exit. And sometimes you can even take steps to address that value gap that exists. So yeah, that's kind of kicking off the session with that is a quite a meaty topic in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. There's so much to unpack here. But I hear you say that these expectations, whether they are rightly set or wrongly set, these expectations can come from different sources, right? It could be like, I need this much, therefore I want this much. It should be sold for that kind of money because I need this money to do,
Yeah.
like fund the next chapter of my life. There's the somebody else with a similar business sold for this much. Mine should be sold for a same amount, if not more. That's another part of it. Or there could be the part where there's actually a professional in the space, which could be like a business broker, where you go and check what your business is worth, and they kind of, let me call it this way, buy your listing. They want to be able to sell your business, and a strategy to do that is to maybe give a bit of an inflated valuation because, if you're a small business owner and you check out 3 business brokers and one is saying your business is worth 700,000 and the other one is saying it's worth 1.3 million, who are you going to go with? Like, who are you going to give your exclusive sell my business listing or mandate? Probably to the one who makes you believe that him or her can sell your business for 1.3 million, right? It's the same like if
Start
you
the
have a
ego,
real
right?
estate. a real estate broker coming into your house and they're like, "Oh, this is your house is amazing. It's worth 1.3 million." And you're like, "Well, if she believes she can sell it for 1.3, I'm going to give the mandate to her because and then let's just
Mm,
see what happens, right?" So there's all of
yeah.
that, and I think another fourth reason might why there might be inflated expectations, which you didn't mention, but I think this is one of the things that I see a lot when people are hanging out in a digital social media space is we only hear about the stories of the
Mm,
6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure, 10-figure exits, like business founder sold his business, raked in $100 million. And you're like,
yeah.
my business is also whatever, a software business. So I should be selling mine for $100 million too. So there's this information around exiting and exiting
Mm.
prices that is very skewed in the media. You only read about those incredible stories for the simple reason that those are the ones you want to read and get
Well,
written
they
about.
clickbait a lot of the time as well. You know, half of those stories aren't true, but it creates this expectation in business owners' minds, right? And if you're not achieving that, you somehow inferior. And maybe just to lead on a little bit from that as well, and it's slightly nuanced, but I think it's also the sort of input output trap that founders often get into. And maybe it leads into a question which I'll ask back to you, but founders often think, well, I've put in so much work over the last 5 years. I've sacrificed so much, so your perception of reality as a founder is often distorted because you're thinking about how hard you've worked. Not The reality is, what is a willing buyer going to pay for this business? What is a willing, they don't see the work that you've done. They see what's in front of this. What can the business do next year and the following year? So that sort of owner buyers, if you want to call it that, you see it from your perspective, whereas a buyer is looking at from an objective external perspective is often a huge gap. And maybe if I
So
can kind of
true.
flip into the next question to you, Lynn, and there's this expectation gap, but there's also this question of, emotional readiness. And I know it's something you're very passionate about, and you see it a lot with the founders, so, um, a lot of founders come say, I want to sell my business, I want to plan for an exit. And then you probe a little bit deeper into their underlying motivations and their why. So maybe you want to share a little bit about that. I mean, what's your experience been with, like, is the founder actually ready to sell? Will they pull the trigger when it comes to the crunch?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's two parts to it, right? There's is the business ready to be sold? That's one part. But then is
Yeah.
the owner, founder ready to actually sell? And I think what we get to see is that it really depends on the motivation and the why of why they want to take a step forward in the exiting. So, what we get to see often is owners who are like, I want to sell because I just want to get rid of this thing. you
Yeah.
know, or I want to sell because I just have a bunch of other things going on in my life, or I want to sell because I want to create a next masterpiece or whatever. So there's all these reasons why an owner wants to sell, but often there's an but or unless or something like that that follows after the sentence, I want to sell my business. Because often it's, I want to sell my business when or if I'm getting this amount of money for it.
Mm,
That's one part. It's never like I want to sell, because if you ask, well, would you be willing to sell it for 50,000? It's like, no, obviously not. Right?
yeah, yeah.
So there's that part. So the conditions need to be right in order for an owner to be willing to actually sell the business. And that's again where that valuation piece comes in, and that expectation of the valuation as
Mm,
well, right? That's why I always say, like, the quicker you get a valuation done and have your expectations aligned with what the business is truly worth, that's only when you can really start thinking and emotionally preparing for that exit. Because if you're miles away from what you want to sell your
mm,
business for, then you'll probably be like, you know what? No, I'm going to stick with this thing for a little bit longer. So I think there's like that part that goes into, like the emotional readiness of selling and business. And then there's also the part of, I've been running this business for so long. My whole
Mhm.
identity is wrapped in this business. It is who I am. It is how I define myself. It is how other people see me. It is how I find purpose in life. It is how I fulfill my mission in life. And whenever a business owner is thinking about selling, that's not what they're thinking about, all the stuff that
Mm.
the business is giving them right now. So, what happens often is when business owners are not really emotionally ready to sell, but they end up selling anyway because there's a good deal on the table or something like that, the whole post exit life becomes rather painful. It's one of the things that we talk about in the seven figure exit program as well. It's like, how is your post exit life going to look like? So many founders who sell or business owners who sell, who have their identity wrapped in this business, they get lost. They get into a
Mm.
depression. They don't feel like they want to wake up in the morning. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have $10 million in the bank if you don't know what your purpose is in life or your next purpose is in life, right? So we always
Yeah.
recommend to kind of get ready for that next phase of life because deals fall through often in the negotiation phase, and you know this as well, Graham, right? Deals fall through in
Mhm.
the negotiation phase because all of a sudden the seller gets cold feet, and it's not about the price or the terms or anything like that. It's like, what am I going to do when I don't have this business anymore?
Yeah, and that's an important thing. I mean, you talk about deals falling through is it's like the boy who cried wolf. So if you're not ready and you go through a sale process, for argument's sake, and you look for buyers when you are ready, maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years later, and you want to do that, often it's very difficult to actually then get buyers to take you seriously because they've spent a lot of money on due diligence, they've been through the process. What's changed? And I've seen that happen many times where you go right through to due diligence complete, binding offers, and have you know sellers pull out at the 11th hour. And that's an horrific outcome for no reason other than I've changed my mind. So I think the other thing, just to kind of lead on from that a little bit, is selling a business is not like putting something on eBay, and or Facebook Marketplace or whatever the case might be, and you put it on today and it's sold tomorrow. I think that's one of the other issues when exiting a business is, yes, it takes time to prepare emotionally. You've dealt with the valuation gap, but it also takes time to get the business ready for exit. And in most cases, it's anywhere from 12 to 24 months. On average, we find about 18 months, and most owners and founders are not ready for that. And in that interim period, your attention shifts from running the business to working on the deal. And when your business is not ready for that, sometimes big issue we talk about that is sort of owner dependence, right? And having a high degree of owner dependence on the business. So now you go into deal mode and the business suffers. And by the time the deal actually happens, your financials have gone backwards. So all these things start to come together. And that's why you've got to realistic expectations, be emotionally ready, be sure you want to embark on that journey, make sure all the basics are in place. Have you removed dependence from you as the owner? Because if you're going through a deal process, not just because a buyer wants to buy a business that's not dependent on the owner, but it also allows you as the owner then to actually focus on the deal and getting the best outcome and all of that, and not be worrying about the day-to-day running of the business. And also making sure, if you've got that in place already, when you go through that deal, the business doesn't suffer because you're not responsible for the day-to-day stuff. So there's a whole bunch of things that come together over here. It looks very simple on the outside. Hey, I go to a broker, I decide to sell my business, I get the price that I want, and in 3 weeks' time, I've got $10 million in my bank account. That's not the way it works in reality. And I think, why is it like this? Is because most business owners who are going through an exit, there's very few business owners who've done two or three or four valuation, I mean, two or three or four exits in their lives. For the vast majority of business owners, they do this once, maybe twice in their life. They're great business people, but they're not necessarily great exiters or deal makers. And then you're dealing with professional buyers, you're dealing with people who do this kind of stuff for a living. So it comes down to, business owners not knowing what they don't know when they're going through an exit or a sale process. So yeah, again, I'm putting in lots of color and flavor into the story, but I think it's really important to understand these things. And that's why it's important to find a program or a support system, like the seven-figure exit, having somebody who's been through the process before who can guide you along the way. Listen to webinars and shows like this that can kind of educate you. And even if it just triggers a little thought in your mind, it's, I didn't even think about that because I didn't know about that, right? So yeah, I mean, I think those are all things that you need to really think about if you're exiting a business, and we see them over and over and over again. We talk about it, like it's our coffee that we're having for breakfast because we do it every single day. But most business owners don't know these little nuances when they're thinking about an exit.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like we don't know what we don't know, right? So that's where this whole
Exactly.
educational part of like read some books about exiting, listen to podcasts about exiting. Like I'm a contributor for Forbes as well. So if you're watching this show and you're looking for resources, like free resources or like cheap resources to prepare you, just you and your business and like this whole journey, and start kicking off that exiting journey, on my Forbes page, I have a couple of articles that refers to podcasts about exiting and great books about exiting written by people who have sold their business and maybe have had some regrets afterwards, and they're sharing that story. So all of that information is
Mm.
out there. So I'm not sure if it's for you when you're listening to this, but if you're like early in this process, that would be a great step, I think, for you to take, is just to kind of start realizing that there's so much to educate yourself on and learn, because knowledge really is power in this journey of exiting, I would say. And we touched a whole bunch of things in terms of like common issues, and I feel like we started all the way at the beginning of the exiting process, which is like, know what your business is worth, and you might be having some inflated expectations of value due to stories you've heard or media you've consumed, or all of these kinds of things. So one of the things that you could do is just get yourself a free independent business valuation. We have on our website as well, that we have developed together with the guys at BizVal and Graham's team. So that's a good starting point, because that at least gives you some indication roughly of what your business is worth right now. And that should kind of, it's like a stick in the ground, and you kind of know where you're at. And that's probably a really valuable first step to take, together with like consuming some of those free, like exiting knowledge resources that are out there. And then the other thing is like the emotional preparedness and readiness for selling your business, which feels like it's all the way at the end of the exiting process. It's like, how is your life going to look like after you've sold? So it's like the valuation piece is the all the way at the beginning, and then the post-exit life is all the way at the end. But actually, it's one of the things you might want to think about already now rather than later, because this might be the reason, if you have a whole identity wrapped up in your business, it might be the reason why you pull out from a deal. And as Graham was saying as well, it doesn't make you look very professional when you do that as an owner. So just starting to, think about how your post-exit life is going to look like, and have a little bit of dreaming as well, like maybe, start dreaming of that yacht in the Caribbean or whatever it is that you're fancying, or spending more time with the family on the beach and things like that. But just kind of wrapping or creating a new identity of yourself that is not fully wrapped around your business anymore. So that's kind of, I just to summarize, I think this show for today. Is there anything else, Graham, that you would love to add to that before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered it all. I mean, I think the last thing I would just kind of reinforce is that, you know, it takes time to get your business ready for an exit. And usually you can't and shouldn't do it on your own. It doesn't mean you need to be spending a fortune with, very expensive advisors. In fact, going to expensive advisors often, especially for smaller businesses, if you're in a 6 or 7 figure business, could actually be quite dangerous. Those businesses are often configured to, sell $100 million businesses, and the requirements for that are quite different. So, you know, just set that expectation around how long is it going to take. Um, don't expect to sell your business in 2 months. It's a 18-month process usually from beginning to end, and I think that's important to have that expectation set up front. But yeah, as I say, this is a topic we could probably spend 2 days talking about, and I guess this show is
It's
really just to dive into some of the
definitely,
the
yeah,
key
I think it's
things.
definitely a topic to talk about in another show in terms of like how long does it really take to sell a business, like just
Yeah,
on average. How long does it really take from the moment you contact maybe a broker till the money gets wired, but also the preparation of everything that goes before you actually talk
yeah,
to a broker and step into that exiting or selling process in itself. I think there's definitely a show we could do around that. It's also one of the questions we get asked all the time, like how long does it take? And there's also some expectations around that with owners
mm,
thinking like, oh, if I start this process now by, the end of the year, I'll be on my yacht in the Caribbean, and that might not be true. Um, Sorry to spoil that for you if you have that vision. It could be, but it's unlikely.
exactly. No, but Lynn, thank
Awesome.
you, thanks again, and yeah, always great to engage with the listeners, and as always, you can reach out to either of us after the show if you've got any questions, and more than happy to take those offline as well.
Thank you so much for being here as well, Graham. So that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Master Your Exit show. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you're leaving with some valuable insights to help you prepare for your big exit. Remember, you can catch the replay of this episode and all other episodes on our website, thebigexit.co/master your exit shows with a dash in between every word, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. And we'd love to hear from you as well. So send in your exit questions that you have before next week's show by heading over to thebigexit.co/master your exit sign up. You can sign up there and send us your exit questions, and we can answer them on a future episode. We'll be back next Tuesday at 7 a.m. LA time, 10 a.m. New York time, 3 p.m. London time, or 4 p.m. Brussels time with more tips, expert interviews, and tools to help you master your big exit. Until then, keep building, keep preparing, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for being here.